So in a previous update log, keep in mind we are using HardOps 987.12, so we're about 2 versions behind. We're also using a version of Boxcutter about 2 versions behind. But if I were to press S and Z and scale this and rotate this object, we now have this object at kind of an unusual rotation. And so if I were to say draw a make shape and then press extrude and we click to apply, if we look at this shape, we see that we have unapplied scale. So because of what I was talking about previously, we know that we want to press Control A and actually apply our scale. And the rotation of this object is fairly simplified in comparison with this object, meaning that when I select both of them and I press Q and go under Mesh Tools, if we shift click Radial Array, we are able to radial array around this object. However, we see that there is an undesirable rotation that occurred. And this rotation is because of differences between this object's origin and this object's origin when it comes to creating a radial array at this location and radiating around it. So more than likely, multiple users have ran into this where they would try to radiate something around something and the object would actually be rotated. And so if we were to lower this to say 4 and take this object, tab into edit mode, we see that we need to rotate this on Z about 90 degrees. We need to press R, Y, Y and rotate it about 90 degrees. And then we're actually back where we started. However, having to do that sort of work when it comes to doing a radial array is just too much. So let's try this operation again. Let's just draw our shape. Let's just press A, and we'll press E to just extrude it out just a little bit. And so one of the solutions I wanted to try is having users be able to press Q, go under Mesh Tools, go under Set Origin, and just click and drag to create an origin, which will basically give this object the correct origin needed to radiate around this object. However, having to go into set origin prior to going into radial array is something that's going to be a little bit of a nuance. And also, what about that scale issue? That scale issue was something that was a little out of control, right? So let's take both of these objects and delete them. And let's talk about radiating around the 3D cursor. So, we'll just grab the corner of this box and press Ctrl-Shift-B to bevel it. And let's just place our 3D cursor here, and let's just perform a cut. So we want our cut to rotate around this 3D cursor. Because this object is rotated in a way that's actually aligned with the plane that it was drawn on, that means that if I go under radial array and actually click radial array, everything works out correctly, right? However, this is no basis of stability for us to be able to work, because in the event that our shape was not actually congruent with the surface that we were radiating around when we were using the 3D cursor, it wouldn't have worked out. And so to show that in action, we're just going to select the object, maybe press Shift V and go into nearest edge orientation so we can orient it to this area. And this shape is definitely not oriented to this particular surface, but we want it to radiate in the 360 method around the surface. So if we select this and we shift click radial array, we see that that's not actually possible. And so this is kind of where this journey ends. And then even to make it worse, this object up here has been rotated and is no longer even the object that we knew and loved it as. So let's try using the same solution that we did using set origin. So at first the idea was that, hey, you should be able to just go into set origin, click and drag a line to basically create what you need, basically giving you the orientation that's desired. And then when you control click radial array, you'll be able to get what you want. However, we see that we didn't actually get the most desired result. And that's because the origin that we want to base this off of isn't actually available to us. And that's because we need to disable some of our booleans. So that way we can select the shape, go under set origin. We can press S in order to see the dots for shapes that are not selected. And we just drag a dot to here, let go. And now this object's actually oriented in a way that will be advantageous to the 3D cursor. And to prove that, I'll just control click radial array, and we see that we're now able to radiate this object around. However, like I said, this is no basis to work. We need something a little bit more stable, a little bit more predictable for users to be able to perform rapid radial arrays without issues and having to deal with their offsets being off and things getting weird. So I just wanted to show kind of just some of the shortcomings of the previous system and how it would fail. Because while I was able to solve it this time, having to scroll back in time in order to grab a pure origin is just lunacy. So there are some things that we did to attempt to mitigate that process, but just to show it again, we'll cut another box, and if we control click radial array, we are radiating around the cursor, but we're not oriented to the surface that we're dealing with. And if we look at our 3D cursor, it's not oriented very well to the surface either. So it's really not a basis for us to play off of. The only thing we can do is really just go back in time to the point that we have the origin desired, and then go under set origin and actually set it to this, and then turn on all the meshes. And from here, we can just control click radial array, and we can just array just like we intended. However, we see that it's a little bit imperfect in some places, but we're not aiming for completion with this model. We're aiming to show where radial array falls short in this particular iteration. So here I am back in the classic HardOps using the classic radial array as you all knew it. And we'll just press S and Z, and little do you know, I just made a serious mistake. With unapplied scale on this object, that means when I press Q and I go in and add a radial array, this object will be radial arrayed with the scale kept, but the empty will also be scaled in order to compensate. And the good news about this is that I can go back in and adjust the radial array just on the fly and change the count to whatever I need it to be, and nothing will be a problem. However, if we were to say select this mesh and add a bevel, we see that there very much seriously is a problem. And that's because the scale's been applied on the object, but the empty has unapplied scale. So if we were to just select the empty and just change the scale to 1, we see that we're back in business. And so this is good and all for whenever you're working in stationary states, or linearity as I call it, whenever you're working with flat X, Y, and Z. But if we were to say delete these objects and begin working at an angle, let's just SZZ with this at a rotated angle, and from here just choose to perform a radial array, and we also were to choose to apply our scale, we see that things get out of control. And if we select our empty, we see that all we have to do is just change this to be 1, and things are back in control. However, because of our transformation that we've given it, we're actually getting an undesirable result, unless you desire getting a result like this. But this sort of thing is one of the problems that really drove me crazy with Array, was that the amount of things that were happening to it beforehand were just unsatisfactory. I mean, in all honesty, basically, if you have your mesh scale and you jump into radial array, I am of the opinion that the object should have its scale applied on the way in. Another thing is, let's take this object and move it away from the origin, and let's press Control A, and we've applied our location. So our location is now here. If I were to press Q and go into radial array, where do you think this radial array is going to begin? If you think it's going to begin where the cursor is, you're absolutely wrong. For some reason, radial array would recalculate the origin based on the location of the actual object, which was also problematic. If we press H, we can see that the option of C will allow us to radiate around the 3D cursor, which is a kind of a band-aid for the situation. But really, this is just part of the long list of issues that was kind of building with radial array and needed to be dealt with. So another situation I just want to show is, let's just take this cube corner, and we're just going to Control Shift B bevel it, and jump over into Boxcutter, enable dots, and we're just going to slice this area out, and press X in order to turn it into a slice, and pressing Q, set origin. We're just going to set our origin to this location, and I just want to show the conundrum that I'm specifically trying to solve, and that is being able to cut a piece out like so, be able to recall that piece, and actually radiate it around the piece at hand. So in order to do it with this piece, we should be able to select this object, and just by shift clicking radial array, we should be able to radiate around this surface. In fact, let's press A to turn off displacement, and let's just roll the wheel to lower our segments, and we see that we were able to get that desired result. So everything is so far so good. But what if we were to, say, draw a circle here and mirror it to the other side, because we've given this object localized symmetry, and we decided that we wanted to shift click to radiate around this? Well, once again, I have to press A to turn off displacement, or D in this case, but really it's a question of, where the heck did my object go? It's not even where did my object go. It said my object had its rotation reset, and we're not going to be able to work this way. I can't work this way. This is freaking insanity, is what I would be saying if we hadn't solved this issue. But with this selected, I'm just going to go under set origin with just that selected, and we'll press S to look at everything that isn't this object, and we'll do something like that, and let's try it again. If we press A to turn off our displacement, we can see that we're nowhere near the desired result. So it definitely can get really hairy whenever it comes to the radial array of your